What makes me tick? The yes, no, and why process. I thought I ordered filet, but I ended up with liver. In our last column, we introduced the yes, no, and why process. It is one of the first places that we can go in order to better understand ourselves and our choices, make changes in our lives, and create a habit that will serve us throughout the rest of our existence. It can assist us in becoming more self-aware during this time of the shift. The ultimate purpose of this habit is to continuously move in directions and make choices that are beneficial to us, that move in the direction of what we want. We often get in our own way by choosing, either by default or in reaction, things that move us away from what we ultimately desire. Initially, we also compound our difficulties by not being clear with ourselves on what we want. What we want is sometimes illusory to ourselves and not clearly defined. It is imperative that we clearly know what we want to accomplish in any particular circumstance so as not to be making choices that essentially take us further away from our goals. So taking some time to establish that with ourselves is really the first step. In another column, we will cover additional tools for doing so, including the equation. But for now, it is enough to have an idea of it so that we can begin our choice examinations in earnest and develop that habit. This is the simplest exercise in the world, what we do for every moment of every day regarding even the simplest of choices. Those choices that we may do automatically or by default, is to ask ourselves what we are saying yes to, what we are saying no to, and why. Knowing what drives even the most rudimentary of our choices is extremely valuable for us to evaluate what we are doing. And what we are doing will shed a great deal of light on what we are creating. In other words, what is showing up in our life. Because, like it or not, we are literally creating everything in our experience. The only time that we are a victim is when we make ourselves a victim. Our choices, the yes, no, and why, will help us begin to see how we create it all. What is challenging in this exercise is being present enough in every moment to do it, and being honest enough with ourselves to allow us to discover what drives our choices. And when I say it is difficult to do with any consistency, it really takes a concerted effort. And when I say honest enough with yourself in evaluation, I can tell you from observing my own behaviors that collectively humanity is the undisputed champions of caginess. We are the poster children of prevarication. We are so adept at blowing smoke up our own asses about our motivations that most of the time we aren't even aware we're doing it. We don't lie to ourselves out of malice. We are not lazy about paying attention to what we're doing. It's understandable that most of the things we do are completely and utterly unexamined. Most of the time we are on autopilot. And a great deal of that is how we were and are raised to be humans. Much of this is for convenience sake, so we don't get bound up in indecision and can move effectively and efficiently as humans. Much like breathing. If we had to think to breathe, that would become tiresome and very inconvenient and would keep us from accomplishing much. But there are good reasons to highlight our awareness of what we are choosing, especially now. We discussed identity, how we form it, and why we hold it so closely. Identity is one of the main ways that we inform our choices. In other words, who we believe we are will have a great deal to do with the choices we make. We have developed identities for, among other things, giving ourselves a blueprint for how to act and what choices we can effectively make without much thought. I primarily identify as a white American male of a certain age who nonetheless has chosen a somewhat different experience for this particular period of my life than many of my seeming peers. And yet, many of my choices and actions are in line with that overarching identity that I have accepted. Now, there is a great deal of that identity that serves me quite well. There's a certain bene toi that comes with knowing what you project and express and how that will be received, how you will be regarded. Identity is a pass. It is a neatened set of rules that allows you to plug into the mass belief in such a way that your choices can be automatic, and you have a relative knowing of what you can expect in return from the outside world. Small wonder we engage such shortcuts given all the demands on our time. Life is busy between work and family and loved ones and leisure. We depend on developing a relative set of rules that we can instantly refer to so we're not dawdling like a jabroni every moment of every day with the simplest of choices. The danger is when the identity drives the expression without examination, and we unwittingly move in opposite directions to our benefits and desires. When the tail wags the dog, when the ego steers the boat. Ego is simply our expression based on accepted constructs and guidelines that have been deemed acceptable by the individual. The automatic choices based on identity. So the first step in the yes, no, and why exercise is knowing what we take for granted based on our identity. What choices we make because they are consistent with our identity. We have to begin by questioning who we think we are and how that will direct our choices. And we have to begin to see ourselves in terms of our public expression and our private expression. That's one easy way to look at it that will help us to see me and me, and that they are not necessarily, in fact, rarely the same. Are they in alignment with each other? Do they share the same guidelines? How does our purpose differ with the different expressions? Who are we doing it for? That last one is a big one, and it is one that is most ripe for self-deceit, because many of the choices we make are not for ourselves and our well-being. We make a great deal of choices out of the expectations of someone else. For all sorts of reasons, for all manner of justifications, we think we owe it to someone. And often we will undertake any form of deception to keep that fact from ourselves. Spouses and partners, parents, children, siblings, friends, neighbors, church, government, society at large. It seems everyone and everything has an expectation of what kind of choices we make. And to a certain extent, that is how society works. And we certainly don't want to alarm or disappoint those relationships that are important to us. But for many of us, it goes off the rails. We begin to believe our own kayfabe, our persona. And like it or not, we often find that we're stuffing ourselves into expressions that are quite unnatural to us, and expected to make choices that really aren't in alignment with our private selves, our true selves, our dream selves. And that can have the effect of derailing what is really in our best interest for ourselves. Others' expectations do not excuse us from the personal responsibility for the choices we make. We often want to make choices, then play the victim card by proclaiming that we didn't have a choice. And when I say personal responsibility, I'm using it in regard to the responsibility we have to ourselves to make choices that are beneficial to us. No one else can do that for us. We must make sure that the choices we make are in our best interest. This is where clearly defining to ourselves what we want and why is of utmost importance. Otherwise, we are moving in conflict to ourselves. So the why part of the question is very important. And it is, in fact, critical to this exercise that we know what our motivations are. Identity and expectations are two of the main ways in which we make unexamined choices. This exercise is a simple way to slow our roll and make certain that we are moving in the direction we ultimately want. It takes practice and patience and honesty with ourselves. The benefit of doing so far outweighs the inconvenience of having to stop and think about what we do automatically. Particularly if we don't like what's showing up in our life, what we are creating, this habit of examination should offer us a very clear idea about what we are doing and how that is resulting in what we are creating. It is shining the light on who and what we are, how our identity informs our choices, and how our choices, even the most mundane, are affecting what we are creating in our lives. And as we move forward into conscious creation, this exercise will be invaluable as a checkpoint for ourselves. Knowing what we are saying yes to, what we are saying no to, and why. The baseline of self-awareness.